Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. We're joined on the line by Douglas Murray. He's the author of a brand new, terrific book called The Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race, and Identity. Just came out a couple of days ago, and it's already starting to run up the charts. Douglas, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, Ben.
So why don't we start with just the basic thesis of your book, The Madness of Crowds. What is happening in our society that is so dangerous and polarizing right now?
So my view is I've been noticing for some years, as you have, as others have, that there are certain issues in our society which we are incredibly bad about speaking about. And that's partly because we don't even allow ourselves to think about them. And careers and indeed lives keep on getting destroyed when people run up against these things. And I notice that they basically fall around four particular categories now. Everything to do with being gay, everything to do with women, in particular relations between the sexes, everything to do with race, and absolutely anything to do with trans. And I decided I would take these subjects one by one, have the discussion we should be having, open up the questions that are there, say the things we do know or we all knew till yesterday, and say the things which we really don't know enough about or not as much as we pretend we do. And I then wanted to just explain why our societies have gone so demented over those issues, and why, in my view, there is just a brute political force using identity groupings for nothing more than political victory.
So, Douglas, I totally agree, obviously, that there's a wide range of discussions to be had about all of the various identity-based issues that you're discussing there. Why do you think that there is such a tendency right now to shut down those discussions? I mean, I had a discussion the other day with a very, very prominent science popularizer, shall I say, and this person kept going on and on about how science always needs to be the basis for all policy, how we have to investigate every area of science. And then I said, okay, well, let's talk about the science of trans. And he immediately shut the door. He immediately said, we can't discuss that because that might end up basically backing assumptions I don't want to make. And I just felt like, well, are you for science or you're not for science? Like, what happened here?
Right, exactly. Well, you'll be unsurprised that one particular event in your own life makes it into the book, into the trans chapter, and you can guess which one it is. But it's fascinating because you know, I wondered some years ago, why does this one keep on tripping people over? And there's a really clear reason why. And there's a reason why, you know, feminists and some gay people and a load of scientists will not do what they're told to do, among others, on the trans issue. And it's because it's the one in our society where people are being told they have to lie. They have to say that the evidence is not true or is not the evidence and to believe something else. And that goes against an entire tradition that we've had for at least a couple of centuries of believing the scientific method is a good way to judge things. And we've decided on this issue not to do that. And my objection to this, and I've had this a lot in the last few days since The Madness of Crowds came out, my objection is not like yours. It's not about pronouns or something. It's about being told to lie. Because I know, and you know, that it's demoralizing, profoundly demoralizing for an individual as it is for society to do even a little lie, because you know that a little lie makes a bigger lie likely down the road. And that's the case on a whole load of things. So that's why the trans one is so particularly close to the boat always.
You know, speaking of Douglas Murray, his new book, The Madness of Crowds, really is a fascinating book. He covers, as he says, the issues and identities of homosexuality, female, race, and trans. Douglas, you're not coming at this from the perspective of straight white male. In fact, you're gay, and yet you are willing to have conversations about basic factual points. This has really fallen out of style on the left, and I guess that is the big question, is why has the left decided that they are no longer going to even embrace the discussion? Because there used to be a sort of faith, at least in left-wing circles, that if you pursued the scientific questions, then you would end up with good policy. And yet now it's an attempt to shut everything down on the basis of identity politics. I mean, to take a perfect example, there's a study that came out in the last several weeks about the origins of homosexuality, and it found, as I think most people suspected, that it's partially genetic and partially environmental, and there is no single gay gene. Now, this seems to me not to really change much, right? I mean, if you want to make an argument for gay rights based on a libertarian John Stuart Mill principle, that's a fairly compelling argument. But people went ballistic about this. In fact, I talked to one of the scientists who helped create the study before it came out, and he suggested that they had to run the study's wording through gay rights groups before it was actually released out of fear of the blowback that would happen for even discussing the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you see, that's one of the reasons I wanted to tackle the gay issue first, because, you see, it's so clear that people have been pretending we know a lot more than we do on that issue. And just as I say, there are other issues we pretend we know about which we really don't, and some that we do that we pretend we don't. And that's something that deranges us. But, you know, the study you referred to exactly vindicates what I say in the book. But you see, there are two things, I think. One is there is just this weaponization of it. I mean, I had this in the last week. I refused to call this pop singer Sam Smith by they, them pronouns, because he says he's non-binary, and I don't think any such thing exists. I just think it means look at me. And you know, because I say I won't do they, them, they, was, them singing good, whatever it is they want me to do with the English language, which I reckon is a pretty precious thing. Because I won't do that, the main gay magazines in Britain and America have been attacking me this week for my prejudice. By the way, they don't bother to mention in the pieces that I'm gay myself, which you could say is sort of disappearing gays. But they don't bother that, of course, themselves. But what they do is to say right-wing maniac refuses to do they, them. Now, this is just politics. They want to win. The same reason they say that black people who are conservative are no longer black and gay people who are conservative are no longer gay and all that stuff. They just want to win. But underneath that, and the one I'm really worried about, is a new generation coming along underneath us who are being told lies and are believing some of these lies and are catastrophizing about the lies. And, you know, I'm passionate about the truth on this because I don't want young people to grow up in lies and to not be able to think about things and not be able to discuss things, because I want them to do more meaningful things with their lives.
So, Douglas, let's talk a little bit about the issue of race, because obviously that comes up in the book as well. And this is extraordinarily touchy. Anytime people talk about race without all of the various qualifiers, they're immediately treated as racist. And you mentioned a number of these issues coming up in your book, everything from the treatment of Nicholas Christakis at Yale to the decent treatment of Sarah Jeong, despite her anti-white comments. What do you make of where we are on race? Is this a bridgeable gap anymore? It seems like reason has gone out the window. We can't treat each other as individuals. We're supposed to abide by these rapidly changing standards of what is appropriate on discussions of race. I don't even know what to make of it, but you do a good job of breaking it down in the madness of crowds.
Well, I'm very worried about this one. I mean, there is to a great extent a version of the American racial divide which has been pumped everywhere at the moment. I mean, we had Black Lives Matter in London a few years ago, and I went to see their protest where they were all walking along the streets in London, accompanied by unarmed British policemen with their hands up saying, hands up, don't shoot. The British police couldn't have shot them if they'd wanted to. It's this weird way in which American racial problems end up getting pumped everywhere else. And I want us to de-weaponize all of these issues. I want us to de-weaponize gay. I want us to de-weaponize relations between the sexes and the issues around women. I want us to de-weaponize trans. I want us to de-weaponize race. And obviously race is one of the hardest, if not the hardest in this. But, you know, if we lean on it as heavily as we're now leaning on it, there is a whole load of hell we can come to here. And I think in all of these cases, in all of these rights claims that I do one by one, the issue is, can we cope with stopping at equal? You know, can we stop at equal? Or are there people who always want to run on past equal to better? And we do get bits of this, and we've got a little bit of it, by no means everywhere. We've got a little bit of this happening in society at the moment, where it's a bit better to be gay. It's a bit better to be a woman, not in every situation, but in some very public situations. And it's a bit better in some situations to be black. And this is a really dangerous thing to say to people, because it's the flip side of that that's so dangerous. It's the whiteness studies and so on, where you have to problematize people who are white. Well, problematizing people who are being white is the same thing as problematizing people who are black. It's taking an uninteresting, what we would hope to be an unimportant characteristic, and making it everything. And if we make race everything, we just have a whole pile of hell in this generation to look through. And you know, I'm so disturbed particularly looking at this in America, I'm so disturbed by the way in which it's basically not about the contents of anyone's speech or their ideas. It's about the speaker. And I quote at the end of the race chapter, the way in which basically Martin Luther King's amazing vision of the future has been inverted in 50 years, so that a whiteness studies professor speaks at Boston University a few months ago and says that people who judge people by the content of their character and not by their skin color are the problem.
Well, let's talk for a second about the origins of this, Douglas. So you talk a little bit about what happened in the postmodern era, because it used to be, and obviously in my own book I talk a lot about sort of the grand narratives that you talk about, the religion, political ideology, these sort of unifying things that were supposed to bring people together or at least give us ideas to rally about, that these have caved away and that social institutions have collapsed. Social media has filled that gap, and that's led to this sort of rapid tribalization. Is that the really big problem? I mean, can big narratives be rebuilt in an era where there's so much comfort to be taken in finding people who look like you or who have the same sexual orientation and can be outward directed at an other that unifies people internally?
Yes, I mean, there are several things there. One is, obviously, there is this political movement that I analyze in the bit about Marxism, the Marxist substructure of a lot of this stuff. They never went away. You know, the working class let them down, so they decided to use identity groups as the new working class, you know, the new proletariat, the new revolutionaries. There's that going on. But there's also this thing definitely within the tech age. I mean, I give an example in the book of what you do if you just do Google image searches, and, you know, your listeners can do this for themselves. We like to think that if we search for something, we get what we ask for. Oh, no, we don't. No, the search engines give us the things we didn't ask for if they're the things we're not meant to search for. If you want to search for gay couples on Google Images, you'll get lots of nice, happy, healthy-looking gay couples. If you search for straight couples, you get mainly gay couples. I mean, you have to see this stuff. It's basically sticking a finger up and saying, oh, yeah, bigot, who would be searching for straight couples then? And we have to work out among other things. And you just did a very good example of it there. I'm so pleased that you show what we need to do if we're going to get out of some of this is, among other things, to show generosity to people with whom we disagree, not to interpret all their words in the most negative light. And, you know, I said recently in the book that we used to work, people like you and me, writers and so on, we used to work on the assumption that you wrote in order that no honest person could misrepresent your words. And now, in the social media age, we are all of us, writers and everybody else, are trying to frame words in such a way that a dishonest person cannot ever dishonestly misrepresent them. And it isn't possible. It isn't possible.
Well, Douglas Murray, the book is The Madness of Crowds. It's a fantastic book. Folks, go get it this week. The Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race, and Identity. Douglas, thanks so much for your time. Really a brave book. And again, appreciate your commentary.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.